Webinar is about to begin. Please be advised that this webinar will be recorded. To ensure a better recording quality, we would like to ask you to keep your mic muted during the presentation. You will have the opportunity to interact with the speakers in the last 10 minutes of the webinar. During our presentation, please feel free to put your question in the chat and stay muted. I will monitor the chat box and we will come back to those questions during our Q&A session. My name is Qingqing Lin. I'm the current chair of the TESOL's Bilingual Multilingual Education Interest section. Again, I want to extend my warmest welcome to all of you. When what you are participating is part of our webinar series dedicated to exploring critical issues in bilingual multilingual education. Our webinars celebrate diverse perspectives as our goal is to build a conversation on how to support, elevate, sustain, and transform bilingual and multilingual education. All participants today will have access to the recorded version, which will be available on TESOL's YouTube channel within a week after today. We will post a link in the following social media platform: My TESOL, Facebook, and Twitter. So please make sure that you follow us, and we would like to hear from you and continue the conversation. And I will put this information in the chat later for your convenience. Today, we have 3 speakers joining us to share their expertise on the following topic: multilingualism, social justice, and intercultural competence in the remote world of the virtual exchange. The presentation will last about 45 minutes, and the rest time will be Q&A. So let me introduce our speaker today. Dr. Devin Thomberg is an educator, psychologist, and committed advocate for social justice and human rights in his teaching, his scholarship, and his life. He is a tenure full professor at Delphi University and just published a book on trust within learning. Professor Oscar Sabelas is academic director and professor at CIEE Seville, where he has developed multiple programs for undergraduate students and faculty from the US. He graduated from the School of Fine Arts at the University of Seville in 1989, where he also holds an MA of Arts and Philosophy. Dr. Clara Weiss-Bowler is an associate professor of TESOL bilingual education at Delphi University. Her research focuses on how digital media technology can be used to support multilingual learners' academic writing skills while valuing their voices, linguistic assets, and composition strategies, ways to better surface and in-service teachers to effectively work with linguistically diverse learners in face-to-face and remote learning environment, and the integration of disciplinary content, academic discourses, and translanguaging practices to support and empower emerging bilinguals. Now, without further ado, we are going to start with our presentation. And I will be the timekeeper for the presentation. Okay, Dr. Thomberg, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. We are so grateful to have some time with you to share with you what we've learned and what you have learned about the topics of multilingualism, intercultural competence, and social justice. The 3 of us have spent an enormous amount of time thinking about and hoping for a continuation of this work, whether there is a pandemic in this world after the spring or not, because we found great access to our students to be able to have these exchanges. So we're very grateful to be here. I'm going to turn this over to Oscar, who is going to lead us through a presentation that I think will be very helpful in giving the context of what we're going to talk about today.
Thank you, Devin, and thank you all for joining us. In addition to Professor Thomberg and Professor Bowler and myself, she couldn't be with us today, but it is a very important partner to this project, to this group we've been developing together, who is Professor Pirio Sorri. Whereas Professor Bowler is from Brazil, Professor Thomberg is from the United States, myself from Spain. Well, Professor Sorri, she's from Finland, and she's the English teacher at the high school level at the school in Seville of the Mission Laïque Française, the French secular mission. She couldn't be with us today, but we have a video I'm going to be sharing with you a little later. And you're going to see her there, and you're going to hear her there together with some of our students. To begin with, I need to share with you a little history. How did the four of us, involving some other educators and many students, both in New York and Seville, how did we, and in other countries actually, when I say New York, I mean Adelphi University, but both Professor Thomberg and Professor Bowler had students attending their classes this past fall semester from different parts of the world. So how did it all start? For a number of years, in my role as academic director at the CIEE Study Center in Seville, CIEE, very briefly, it's probably the largest organization providing study abroad programs for college students from the US all over the world. And as it happens, the study center in Seville is one of the 2 or 3 largest that the organization has. On a normal year, up until 2019, we could receive in Seville up to 800 to 900 students, which is a very large number for a study abroad site. So there are many things. I mean, I've always been quite concerned about our students studying abroad, not just having an experience that is rewarding, meaningful, and productive for them, but actually help them have the opportunity to make the experience as reciprocated as possible with their host community. So I've been strategizing in different ways, but one of the most simple and definitely the most successful initiatives I've been able to coordinate with my colleagues here in Seville over the past few years is what we've been calling the Culture and Language Assistant volunteering program, which is a community engagement project for these students who come to study, to be with us in Seville. Each fall or spring semester, we have over 100 participants collaborating as English teaching assistants, assisting a lead teacher, a number of lead teachers in as many as 14 different local schools. I made the multiplication, how many actually local students would these 100 or 100 and a little bit participants be reaching each semester. It would be over 2,500 students, counting that we have an average of 23, 25 students in a classroom. From all ages, from primary school, young kids, 5, 6-year-olds, all the way up to 12th grade, the 16, 17-year-olds. So these students go to the school and an average of twice a week, spending probably 4 hours altogether during the week. They're just collaborating in the functioning of the English classrooms of these schools. When we had the disruption in mid-March due to COVID-19, all of these students that were in Seville, including our 103 volunteers that specific semester, had to return home quite abruptly. I had an idea as soon as they were settled and they continued with their classes with me as well. Online, I sent an email to all of these volunteers and asked them if they'd be willing to continue with their volunteering, but now instead of reaching 2,500 kids, more or less, to work individually on a one-on-one basis with a number of students, connecting virtually and still working with them in their English, but of course, as Professor Thomberg and Professor Bowler will now also share with you, as soon as there is an exchange, an individual, personal exchange in between sitting here and sitting there, it goes well beyond the language. So we advertised this. About 60% of the students that were back in the US decided to volunteer. We made very direct connections with just one school because that's how many kids we could serve. These 60 individual students then connected with some 80 students here in Seville, because some of them decided that they had time to actually connect on a weekly basis with not just one, but two kids. And even though it was improvised, I could not provide much guidance, just making sure that the connections were working, that every student who wanted to volunteer and every kid in this one school, and we were only working with sixth graders who wanted to have this opportunity, had the opportunity properly. But the feedback that we started to receive from very early on, both from students in Seville and from students in the US, wherever they were, and from their own universities, was phenomenal. We had the University of Iowa running a big feature on their website with the experience of 3 of their students who were participating, Elon University as well, and the families, many of whom I knew, just sending me messages saying how great in general it was, and how in fact many of the students and many of the kids kept connecting after the semester or the school year was over, well into June. In the middle of it, I share it with friends and colleagues in different places. And as Professor Thornberg will tell you now, at Adelphi University, it was a great response and great interest. And this is what happened. So Devin.
So this work that really started some years ago with CIEE and Oscar really was an effort to try to maintain connections internationally for our students. As you all know, in your parts of the world, and I see everybody from Egypt to Canada to Morocco, it's very good to see all of you. We've all been sheltered because of the pandemic and trying to maintain connections to each other as well as to other countries. We had hoped that we could continue this through a virtual environment. Professor Bowler has spent an enormous amount of time in her own classes trying to innovate, as have I, in making these virtual exchanges happen between students. I began in Morocco last spring trying to develop a virtual exchange with students from Morocco before the pandemic happened, and it was to be STEM projects with students and teachers there through the International Conference of Educational Quality. It is a conference that was to be housed in Agadir, Morocco, and it ended up being canceled because of the March pandemic, determining that we would only have opportunities virtually, if at all. What that then led to was contact with Oscar and Professor Bowler to be able to develop a vision of what we could do from the pandemic that could be generative, that could be an opportunity to think more positively about the work, both language-wise and culture-wise. And this included a partnership with MLF. The Mission Laïque Française was an opportunity through Sevilla and elsewhere, because of their teaching of 3 different languages, the opportunity to develop language skills and cultural awareness for our students as well as theirs. The opportunity was created by both Carlos Pineda, who's on the screen, as well as Oscar, to provide the programmatic components to this that ended up being very responsive to the differences in culture and language of our students and theirs. And between Professor Baller and myself, we worked with Pedro and Joseph Haddad, who is the head of MLF in Sevilla, to create an opportunity for these students to exchange both culturally as well as personally in language and culture. And we are so grateful for this. This is going to develop into a second semester in the spring with other MLF schools in other sites. We hope that we can bring international partners into this to have exchanges with a common platform, if I can put it that way, between what Oscar and Carlos created and what our courses provide. So we're very grateful to all of you being here today to hear what the lessons were that we've learned from this process.
Mm-hmm. Devin, I was thinking as we had planned, just one fact, and it is that our connection with the Mission Laïque Française, the French secular mission school in Seville, which, as it happens, actually is a very small but a very interesting school. As Professor Thomberg has just said, this is a multilingual school where they have 3 official languages: French, Spanish, and English. But then there are students who have other native languages different to any of these 3, including, for the most part, Darija, because they have a number of students of Moroccan origin, Russian as well as a native language of some of their students. It is truly fascinating. And the French Secular Mission School in Seville is one of the schools originally participating in our volunteering program that I've mentioned before, and by far the most committed and interested in supporting any kind of exchange. And now we know that not only because of the great virtues of Principal Hadjaj and Professor Sori, but because that runs within the philosophy of the French Secular Mission. And as Professor Thomberg has just said, we have received the commission, so to speak, from the French Secular Mission to try to make this project as global as possible, involving as many of their schools as they can. The French Secular Mission has, from kindergarten to K-12, about 60,000 students all over the world in 34 different countries. It is a phenomenal institution, a non-profit institution. So I think, Professor Thomberg and Bowler, that we were going to ask our participants if after this brief introduction and before we go into more detail, if they would like to share experiences of multilingual, multicultural, virtual exchanges, if they have, and what lessons they have learned. Maybe we can devote a few minutes to that, 5 minutes perhaps to
I think that's great. And I think that the group that's assembled here obviously has been trying to innovate their own pedagogy and their curriculum in ways that we are too. So this is a sharing opportunity among all of us. Clara, do you want to add anything to what I had said about this exchange at this point?
No, I think you are doing a great job. I think I feel privileged to be able to be a part of this. And as my students, I think it's a leap of faith that once we engage in this kind of virtual exchange, that we will have challenges, but that it's worth it. And convincing the students, I think, is one. I want to hear from the participants about their experience.
Yes.
Because my students, initially, they are very hesitant. If we play a little bit of their videos, you will see they all start with, I didn't know where I was going to get into, but so I thought it was pretty funny that.
It's
Okay.
true.
So we can unmute participants, Ching Ching. Don't know if I can do that, or maybe you can do that to unmute participants.
Or they can put something in the chat as well, Oscar, if there's anything that they have experienced in terms of the lessons to be learned with this.
Seems like Lynn and Nada wanted to share. Yeah, Lynn.
Hi, I'm so excited about this session because like I mentioned in the chat, connecting students has always been a focus in my job. And actually I work with international students in the US, so it's kind of a reverse process in a way, but my focus has been connecting them with American students and among themselves. So I have run quite a few programs, including a conversation partner program, and even if only a few students can form friendships, and they can really be life-changing, and they keep in touch even when the international students go back to their home country. And now I also work with students in Vietnam, and I have organized so many virtual conversation hours, and I know that they have been beneficial, but sometimes it's true, students hesitate to participate in these unless someone they know maybe recommends it or nudges them a little bit. So today I actually had a student from Saudi Arabia because his father knows me. So he recommended the event and he participated for the first time. So I thought that maybe we will have him back, and maybe I can grow. And my goal for this year, and one challenge, is to get more students to be involved and to connect students from more diverse countries. So I just want to share some of my experience.
That's great. I hope we can connect too, Lynn, so that we can share ideas.
Thank you.
It's probably out of turn, but the courses that Clara Baller and I had taught had multiple languages and nations involved in it. Students that were stranded because of the pandemic in their countries, and trying to make connections among them, as well as to the students in Sevilla, were really challenging, but really exciting at the same time. I had 12 countries and multiple languages in my class, and this opportunity that you're describing sounds like it would be of value to have an exchange just among us as to how that can work. So are there others? Oh, okay, so we have, I have the aspect of sharing stories among students in different places and how people can relate to different stories, and ultimately felt that they were being heard and not alone. It's so important. Discovery that virtual engagement is possible, not ideal, but possible.
Yes, I like the idea of just gonna share another personal experience with my students. I shared with Dr. Thornburg and Professor Ceballos. I had some students that were not doing well because of the pandemic, emotionally and even academically. But with the project, they had to meet weekly, and they are going to explain. And they were very diligent with meeting weekly, with talking with them. So I talked with my students and said, why is it that you are so committed to this? Because you seem to be struggling in other areas. And I feel that this project really gave that emotional support to the students. So I think it taps into what Domitila shared, that is this idea of not being alone, right? That and you have each other.
And it's a challenge partly because of this remote environment for them to connect to one another. That's a very big part of this. So Habiba said, from the USA, I'm a grad student. Since I'm Asian, I have experienced classes with different cultures. I found it interesting to have a multicultural setting for learning as we come to know about various cultures. At the same time, we also discover what we don't know about another culture. Just to share an experience, Habiba, with this, my co-instructor for my course, which was done very intentionally, was a student, a previous student that I had had who is in Malaysia, who with co-teaching with me could, if I can put it this way, draw out people from different languages and cultures in understanding how those differences may play out, not just across countries and regions, but within countries and regions. And it allowed for an exchange that was richer. And hopefully we'll have some time before this session's over with to show you an example of that.
I wanted to say something about this too, because it's about the assumptions, right, that students make. For example, assumptions, well, our students connected with students that were located in Sevilla, but ended up getting to know a very diverse group of students. So they thought, oh, these students are going to speak Spanish and they're going to be this, they're going to be that. But then they realized that there were students from Africa, from other parts of Europe, from Canada too, in the school in Sevilla. And the other thing is about the international students too, because since the international students could not come to the US, so they were registered to take our classes in the US at Adelphi. So their dream was to come to the US and take classes in the US, right, as an international student. But they ended up in this very international class itself because of the virtual environment. So they themselves were really experiencing, I think, what Habiba was saying, that you come with the assumption, oh, this is going to be an American class about American culture, whatever that means. And then they ended up in a very multiple diverse class that they were not expecting. And that was a really pleasant surprise, I think, for them, that to realize that the world is so big.
I also see in the chat children singing in different languages. It was amazing. That just to share another cultural exchange, part of what Oscar and Carlos did in their programming was allow for an opening up of exchanges around the world. And in New York City, there is an international immigrant school that's exclusively for immigrant students coming into the United States. And the ways that they were communicating with my students, because my students didn't speak any of the languages that were represented in the group, was through song. And they sang and they were engaged at a level that they wouldn't have had otherwise.
One comment before I go into thank you for sharing to all of the participants who have done it. And next semester, as Professor Thornburg was saying, we're gonna have at least one more school from the French Secular Mission joining the project with classes at with students from courses taught at Adelphi University by Professor Bowler and Professor Thornburg. It's going to be a school from the Canary Islands, the school in the Canary Islands that the French Secular Mission has, a very large school, many students, all from the 10th grade. And in this case, I was asking the principal about the students, and it seems that it's going to be a lot more homogeneous group of students in terms of nationality and culture, with one very interesting factor to keep in mind. The Canary Islands, as you know, is off the west coast of Africa, kind of towards Mauritania. And Spain, it's far north, I mean, in comparison to that. So the contrast there is not so much about international students or students of different origins, but those who come from the peninsula, from the mainland, and those who come from originally from the Canary Islands. And there is apparently a very interesting contrast in between them. So there's going to be a very interesting factor as well to bring into these exchanges. Professor Bowler was saying before, anything can happen once you steer these connections up. And that's why we should continue doing it for a very long time, because we never know what we are going to learn and what our students are going to learn and find. So just to let you know with a bit more detail how we have been operating. What we've done is simple, as I said before. We've taken the main component of, or the main idea of a virtual exchange, which is nothing too innovative about it. It's a well-established practice, but we have added upon it a collaborative study abroad model based in the sharing of personal narratives. So students this first semester of the experience, our first pilot experience, have been sharing, especially while they were confined, things which are very close to them: my room, my home, my family, my school, my friends, my neighborhood, my city, my life, my stories and your stories, the stories of the other. And when you think about it, especially from my perspective of over 20 years working as an international educator, these are the actual non-superficial components of studying abroad. I mean, if you remove the luxury of going to the place, of actually traveling, of being able to go places, of you know, so to speak, the tourist experience, when you remove all of that at the end, and I've seen it many times, what's really meaningful for the students, especially our students in Seville who stay with families, who make friends, at the end, when you talk to them days before they are about to return to the US, this is what they talk to you about. This, which I have in the sort of pink circle, and that is what we have tried to reproduce with our students through this experience. We wanted our students to actually have a content and to be able to articulate by themselves this weekly exchange. Our students have been paired. In some cases, we've made trios because, of course, we didn't have even numbers. And for the most part, we've had pairs, but occasionally we've had one more mature student because they're older at Adult Phi, connecting simultaneously with two students in Seville. In Seville, we've been working with students from 9th to 12th grade. And we made a point of connecting the younger students with the more mature students. So specific students whom we knew in Seville had special capacities or special needs, have been paired again with the more mature students that Professor Bowler, Professor Thomberg, and also Professor Coogan, who's not here with us, could identify in their classes. And we offer them a project or a model based on 4 creative projects on which they had to work independently, but about which they needed to keep each other informed. So approximately every 3 weeks, the students were given a project. The first one was the construction of a self-portrait, who am I? And students had a number of small little tasks about which they could be talking while they were meeting weekly. The final project here, with the final result, was a short video. They were given tools to actually be able to make this video as a visual narrative with a certain level of proficiency. The second project was expanding the focus, my community, what is my world? And again, the students had to produce through intermediate tasks, had to produce and share final video. The third one was about the others, who is the most important person, or who are the most important persons in my life. And here we concentrated on a written project and on photographs as well. And then the last project, the place where I'm going, what will be the best version of myself in the future. Students again had to produce a video. And to go with each of these projects to facilitate the tasks of the students, but also of the educators, because these are materials that the teachers, the professors have been using in class with their students. We have created a set of activities, and I'm giving you the third project, which was the one about the most important person in my life for you to see. This is what the students receive in a PDF or on a screen when this was being shared with them by their teachers. We offer them a model. Here is Frida Kahlo, and there is a number of adjectives, both physical and psychological, about her personality. So students do an initial reflection. We take this to a person who is close to them. The students choose this person. It could be someone's grandmother, as Professor Bowler was pointing out before we started the session. Bringing these elements to the work that the students do together, very personal elements, means that we're bringing the culture, we're bringing the way in which the students, right, Professor Bowler, in which the students, for instance, do something as simple as define a name, a grandmother in their native language, because it's usually a term of endearment connected to that. And even though it is a very simple fact, a very simple factor, it contains a lot of information about the person, about a lot of affective information about the person. There is a lot of intention in there. So
Oscar, if I could just give an example too. I think this is a wonderful opportunity for translanguaging, in the fact that when they are brainstorming on how to describe their most their ideal person or their heroes, they can use all of their linguistic repertoire. So I was just commenting, for example, that usually multilingual children, they call their grandparents by the name in the language that they speak to them, right? So for example, my children, they call their grandmas vovó in Portuguese. And I see that happening a lot with my students too, that they speak Spanish is abuela, and etc. And then, but I also think that in the adjectives themselves, they could also, because, you know, sometimes there are ways we describe a person that we love in some languages that are not translatable. So that could be a wonderful opportunity to talk about those nuances and share and use all of your languages in a way that it doesn't need to be translated into English if it's not translatable, or that same opportunity to see that same descriptor in many languages can also open up windows to many ideas too, and many important aspects of their cultures and communities.
Exactly. Yeah, and I mean, we haven't specifically mentioned that the exchange, but it's obvious, takes place in English. Of course, for the French secular mission, it's very important to actually, I mean, they're drawn into this project because it is a great way for the students to improve their English skills. But what they have, and they knew this, because it's as educators, they have a very broad vision. They know that the language is a vehicle for something much bigger. So at the end, we almost forget that we are talking about an exchange that takes place in English, because it's just permitting the contact in between the students to happen, and we are beyond the linguistic step, so to speak. But So continuing with our input, this contains regular elements of a language class. Students are motivated to think, to reflect, to speak, to write, to read in this case. So the succession of materials that we offer the students in this project, in this unit, involves at this stage to now think about how to describe it, because this is what the students are going to do in the end. The students are going to write a profile of a person who's very important for them. They're going to do this as a tribute to that person. So here we give them the example of a very short text written by a former student of mine, where instead of describing her mother, in this case, as her favorite person, using adjectives, she is writing a story in which the attributes of her mother are made evident through an anecdote. So students are motivated to read and understand this text and share their ideas about it. Then we continue building the unit, and we made a little structuring, telling students about how to use physical description, using the context, because people are always doing things in a certain context and not standing alone in the world, but always being part of a wider context, interacting with other people and with the environment. And then the actions and the attributes of these people, these persons, show within those contexts. We provide little examples. These are examples of texts, in this case also written by former students of mine, things that we have published in the past. And then when students have work with all of these materials, we've wrapped it up and we guide them towards the construction of the final project, which, as I said, in this case, is a written text, a profile. And then in the end, we provide links for them to, once they have completed this and they have shared with each other the story they've written about their favorite person, to read more, to see what other students have written in the past about a mother, a sister, a best friend, or a granddad. So this is just one. And again, like this, the students complete throughout the course of the semester 4 separate projects. And now, Professor Bowler, if you would like to add to the reflection, I've sort of explained a little bit things from the perspective of the French secular mission and also the projects, but I think you would want to share a bit more about the experience for your students.
Mm-hmm. So we, I think from the beginning, we had in mind that English would be a medium for the conversations, but we were not limiting our students in any way to just use English. One of the objectives of the virtual exchange is the development of English proficiency, especially for the high school students, because this is in place of the foreign language class, which is English. So they in their school, they have Spanish and French mainly as the language of instruction, but they also have Spanish because they are located in Sevilla, and they have English as a foreign language. So this was a dynamic project-based way for them to engage in their foreign language class, which is really nice because instead of just being in class, right, they were connecting with speakers of English in New York. But you know, New York is also a very diverse place, and then these multilingual students in Sevilla, they meet our students that are also multilingual. So what happens in a multilingual environment is that you are gonna use all of your linguistic repertoires and your ideas. So when we so initially many students encountered, I think, some barriers, right, of communication when they were meeting it, and this was mentioned by some of you in the chat. But what we saw happening is that weekly they would evolve in their communication with each other when they met, and we found out that they were very creative in tackling the problems that they encountered. So they use the meetings to discuss shared interests by doing the project. They also use synchronous and asynchronous media. So Chin Chin was asking about time difference. Time difference was a big problem for all of our students to meet. So when do we meet? When do we talk? They had to meet once a week for 1 hour, more or less, to talk. And so then they started using Instagram. They started using WhatsApp in addition to the meeting, because sometimes they couldn't meet at a certain time, so they couldn't meet synchronously, let's say via Zoom. So they started being very creative in meeting, and in that they started really becoming friends, because you know, youth nowadays, that's how they communicate, through social media. And then what we discovered also is that unintentionally translanguaging was happening all the time. So translanguaging means that they weren't really using all of their languages to communicate. So when they met, what happened was that the students that spoke French or Spanish, they could really communicate if the students in Sevilla spoke Spanish, for example. So I had a number of Spanish speakers that could use, so they said, oh, I'm using Spanish a lot when I meet with them, which was also interesting. And the French students too, the French speakers on our side in New York that could speak French, they also used a lot of French to communicate, to get to know each other. They code switched a lot. So for example, one of the Devin's Professor Thornburg students, they said, oh, I thought I was the only one that started a sentence in French and finished in English, but the students in Sevilla, they did the same. So they were having fun using language. So that was an really interesting outcome from the conversations. And okay, Hannah, sorry. And then the last thing was that they themselves also were very creative in using translation tools. So they were using Google Translate, they were using other resources to communicate. So I think that at the end, they were not only learning about themselves and each other, but also learning how to communicate, right? So how do you communicate using all of the tools that you have? So not letting the barriers stay there, but also overcoming these barriers by using all of the tools that we have nowadays. So I think someone in the chat said virtual is not ideal, but it can work. Yes, especially if you use all of these resources, and they were very creative indeed.
Yeah, thank you. I was thinking that maybe I could share the 2-minute video that we have from the French Secular Mission, in which Professor Sori and some of her students share their experience. And I have it here. Sorry, I need to move back. And I think the sound we've tested before would work.
This is a virtual cultural and linguistic exchange project between the university students from the United States and from our students from Lycée Français de Séville. They meet online once a week during the term, which allows Lycée students to practice their English while creating a bond between a peer from another cultural context. At the same time, there is an element that enriches this experience and takes it to another level of learning, which is that in addition to their meetings, students exchange written, photographic and video projects that are integrated in their English classes and work as tools for reflective thinking and self-knowledge. Students create video self-portraits, they explore their context with their cameras, write reflections on the most important people in their lives, examine their emotions through their own audiovisual creations. They learn to tell stories about themselves. In the future semesters, the Lycée students will work with different peers in the United States and on different types of projects, reflecting, for example, on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals for the year 2030.
for me, it meant a very good opportunity to learn more about other countries and persons.
To make videos about places you like and share with other people, because that's not something really usual to do in school. Telling someone that didn't know about our country how life is here. And I really like it. And everyone was able to know things about me, and so I really liked it.
Okay, and okay, that was from the French Secular Mission. Just very briefly as well, before we open the discussion. Well, I think, well, no, we'll leave it there so that we have time for the discussion. But before that, Professor Thomberg could probably make a reference to a very important component. And as Professor Piri has just mentioned in the video, in future semesters, we could open it up. I mean, we could take it beyond the personal narratives, and for instance, we could work on the UNESCO's development goals for year 2030, and students could actually be, and this is very much within the spirit of the French Secular Mission, that students discuss global human issues. But Professor Thomberg, maybe you would like to make a reference to the importance that this has on the present and the future of the project.
So the future has been guided by our students. I hope people could see on the screen, this was a presentation by Micah Pravda, who is a Russian student who is now in the United States. He speaks 3 languages, and the translanguaging that Professor Baller was talking about was part of his experience. We did presentations in the middle of the semester, and his notions of culture changed dramatically. We did significant work in thinking about how students from Sevilla, Spain, and the backgrounds of French, Canadian, and Quebec from the students, as well as Italian and Spanish, might be understood from his own perspective, having been an immigrant, and his own cultural identity. This is something that I would like us to be able to develop in the future. He talked about his own holidays. He talked about his own language. He talked about his own experience. And he talked about his own capacity for empathy. This is the psychologist and the softie in me, but frankly, everyone, for me, this was the largest benefit from this project, about students that took their own culture for granted, and they're being able to see diversity for the acceptance that it can create. And this was Micah's gift to us to be able to move forward. I also want to share with you that this went way beyond the boundaries of Sevilla. This is a student in Myanmar that had an experience in working in a way that he had never.
My name is Chu, and this is my cultural exchange project PowerPoint. So first thing is, so what's culture? According to Edward Tyler, culture is that complex whole which includes knowledge, belief, art, morals, law, custom, and any other capabilities and habits acquired by man as a member of society. The important characteristics of culture are learning, sharing, norms, values, languages, and symbols.
I won't go further with this because I want us to have time with everybody, but I want you to know that this is a young man who never had his camera on, who never, ever would be engaged in the discussions without having an opportunity to have experience with this. He had a cultural exchange partner from his own region of the world. He talked about languages, he talked about cultures. We can make these videos available to people if you would like to see them. This young man was transformed by the experience. And I am so grateful to have the opportunity to work with someone like him, because he showed us what was capable from his own language background. His language skills in English were relatively difficult for him to develop until this exchange happened. So I just wanted to share that, Oscar. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to do that.
Thank you so much, Professor Thornburg, Devin. All right, so maybe now we can open the conversation for the last, we've passed a little time, but still we have a bit of time, right, Chin Chin, for...
We have 5 minutes remaining. So from the audience, if anyone want to ask question, you know, please feel free, welcome, and just unmute yourself.
While people are thinking about that, let me just say, one of the questions that Ching Ching asked us was about the social justice aspects of this. What this experience has opened up for Oscar and Clara and Pedro and myself and Carlos and everyone involved in this is how social justice has to begin with personal change. And that your ability to, as educators, provide that support to students to make that connection is so valuable across languages and cultures.
Yes, are there any questions from the audience? If not, I would like to ask a question. So in your study, you have mentioned that some of the students join the program with the intention to improve their English. And I know the European has been a multilingual society and have a long tradition of multilingualism. So I'm wondering how that language awareness shifting, you know, through in the past few years of the European history and also in the global landscape. So I'm wondering what opportunity can virtual exchange provide to help shift the existing, you know, the power, the language power relationship whether in higher education or beyond higher education, and ultimately toward a more appreciation of multilingualism. So if each of you can provide some kind of concluding comment, it would be great.
Clara, would you like to address that?
Yeah, I think it starts with professional development, really, for me, because I feel that the teachers need to be completely on board of shifting that idea, because it's from the teachers that the design, the materials will come from, right? So we need to see other languages being used in the materials, other languages being used when students interact, and see that that's a typical way of interacting among multilingual people. We are not multilinguals, we interact in many languages, and that's a natural part of speaking to each other, right? So I think that if that is seen natural from the materials, from the teachers, from the initiatives, from the projects, then, for example, the products of the products could be include multiple languages as well. I think that's a movement, right? For us too. I think that we are growing with that, but the more we do it, the more I feel we will be comfortable with shifting that perspective, because for a global society, we need to see beyond English, of course. English as the medium, yes, but a multilingual version of TESOL.
I think it was professional development as well as curriculum development too. And I would say the benefit to the students that were coming from other languages, I see this in the chat, that weren't focused on the world languages, if I can put it that way, but more how language and power are interplaying in the ways that regions are dynamically interacting with one another became a major theme for the course as we were developing these cultural exchanges. So I had students from the same country realizing that having 3 and 4 languages spoken within that country, which of those languages had dominance and which of those languages had integration of language aspects, and how things like, for example, food would result in language hybrids in a way that allowed for sharing, was something that opened their eyes to really how language and power are interacting. So that in and of itself was tremendous value around these cultural exchanges.
Thank you. Like you said, the multilingualism shouldn't be imposed as a top-down policy, should be developed as a movement. But like you say, it should start with teachers' awareness to create an ecological system in their classroom to foster, to cultivate multilingualism awareness. So with this, we must conclude today's TESOL Bilingual Multilingual Education Interest Section webinar. Today's presentation was titled Multilingualism, Social Justice, Intercultural Competence in a Remote World of Virtual Exchange. A shout out to TESOL International for their continued support for our outreach effort, and special thank you to today's presenter. A very thought-provoking webinar. Thank you so much. This will conclude today's webinar. Please don't forget to join us for more discussion on my TESOL, Facebook, and Twitter. Thank you. We're actually going to have some kind of Q&A session after the webinar. So stay tuned. We will reach out to us. We will reach out to you and let you know how to participate. Okay, thank you very much. Take care and see you next time in our webinar series.